you made a very interesting point, Rehan. I wanted to just touch on it. You've said basically that because the debate right now is in terms of solutions is you have one side that is very anti-IMF. The government is basically saying we're not going to go to the IMF no matter what. There's a political angle to this as well. Then you have Dr. Harsha De Silva, Mr. Ran Vikramaratne, the MPs who are very much pro-IMF. I wonder where you fall on the IMF, and I just want to quote something you wrote. I'm just going to paraphrase here, and you said, we will be unable to avoid austerity because the point is that the country is undergoing a self-imposed IMF program in the form of import restrictions and foreign currency shortage leading to what is essentially rationing. So I suppose from that I'll surmise that you are supportive of an IMF program.
Yes, I mean, I definitely think an IMF program is sort of the way to go. I know that we have sort of delayed the talks about debt, restructuring debt, and now I saw recent articles, we are going to China and Japan and asking them to sort of restructure our debt. I mean, I can't think of sort of any other nation that has come to the brink that we are in and sort of come out of it without IMF support. And I think there's a misunderstanding that IMF is sort of going to bail us out. They're going to give us all the money and we can pay our debts just, like that. But actually what they're going to do is they're going to give us the credibility, which is something we don't have, the credibility and the confidence to go out and talk to our lenders and tell them, look, we are in a really bad situation and we need your help. So can you work with us? Now, if we do that just on our own, they're not going to take us seriously. So we need someone almost like a chaperone or a disciplinarian behind us to show that, okay, we are serious about the changes that we want to make.
Okay. The thing, I mean, my brief research into the IMF, the one that comes up is Joseph Stiglitz, who was, I think, the lead economist in the World Bank during the early 2000s, and he's, I think, written widely on the IMF. He I think, points to, say, Pakistan and Haiti, for instance, which have had multi-decades, I think 30 years for Pakistan and 40 years for Haiti in terms of their IMF programs, and they're still very much in debt, still very much poverty-stricken countries. He points basically to conditional lending. Now, I think the point everyone makes in Sri Lanka, Dr. Harsha De Silva makes it best, that conditions are probably a good thing for Sri Lanka in some sense because we clearly have very little financial discipline. But is there some basis for this, for the idea that if we go in for an IMF program, that their restrictions will hamper our aggregate growth? Because we seem like there is certainly there's pent-up demand anyway among consumers, but there's also a pent-up demand amongst businesses to go into some kind of fast growth environment. Now, would those two things match? I mean, imagine we go into an IMF program, and let's say even a new government comes in and goes into an IMF program. Then that government gets hamstrung by the IMF conditions, and they can't spend, they can't create employment opportunities, etc. So come back to square one then. So how do you see the IMF in that sense?
So I mean, personally, I don't think we should be blaming IMF for the state we are in.
Of course,
and even if the other countries you mentioned, which are Pakistan and Haiti, I mean, what the IMF will do to us is they'll give us the support. But it's like that, there's a saying, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make the horse drink the water, right?
Right.
So we have to take the initiative and drink the water. We need to we need to do the reforms which are necessary, and all the reforms that I think, I mean, of course, we don't know what an IMF program will look like if we do go into one. But based on sort of the past, we can assume that we're going to be asked to sort of trim down our budget deficit, and we're going to be asked to sort of increase our tax revenue. So these are all things that we actually have to do. Whether it's the IMF telling us or whether it's, there are so many domestic experts telling us the same thing. So it's really a matter of, are we committed to it? Are we going to commit ourselves to reform? Because I've read one study by Professor Premachandra Atukorala.
Yes.
So he studied sort of the growth rates between when we were in IMF programs and when we were not, and actually he found a positive relationship between the years. So when we were in IMF programs, there was higher economic growth.
Okay, interesting.
So I think it's something that, you know, we need to commit to, and I'm not sure why we're always on the defensive with IMF. It should be about sort of how do we work with them to get ourselves out of this situation and to permanently make sure that we don't go back to it again.